I am going to be talking about an application of AI and machine learning that we have been exploring at the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm going to give a quick introduction to myself, and then the talk is structured into two parts. The first part, I'm going to be covering the problem. What is the problem we're trying to solve with our technology? And then the second half of the talk will be going into a little bit more detail about the solution itself. So first up, just a quick introduction to myself. I'm a product manager at the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm focused on the author experience in journal publishing. So the Royal Society of Chemistry is a society publisher. We also have an education department. We do science and policy. But yeah, the area that I work in is the journals publishing area. Before working at the Royal Society of Chemistry, I worked at Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and I worked in a variety of roles there. I started off in production. I moved over to product management. Before I worked at the university, Cambridge University Press and Assessment, I was a researcher. So my current role sort of embodies all of those different roles into one, which is perfect. When I saw that job description, I was like, that is great for me. I can use my researcher hat, my product manager hat, and my publisher hat. So moving on to the main part of the talk, the first part of this talk, as I mentioned, is going to be structured around what is the problem that we are trying to solve with our technology. So, as the sort of title of this suggests, Jump How High, I'm going to be talking about some hurdles faced by researchers when looking to publish their research. The data that I'm going to be talking about in the first half of this talk comes from a paper. I've linked the QR code that will take you straight to the paper. It was published by PLOS Biology earlier this year. This paper demonstrates that researchers who have English as an additional language are disproportionately affected by the fact that English is the global standard for how we publish research. That's good in some ways, in that, English being the main language of research is good in some ways in that it means that you're not having to trawl through a load of content in 100 different languages. However, it does mean that those who aren't native English speakers are disproportionately affected. This paper demonstrates it's even more so for researchers earlier in their careers. We know that the art of communicating scientific language is very much a skill that is developed over your career. So senior career researchers who have been communicating in English their whole life, they're communicating their science in English their whole life, the impacts drop off a lot more. It's really those early career researchers who are disproportionately affected by having to write in a language that is not their native tongue. So you thought you were coming to a talk. Actually, you guys have got front row tickets to a race today. It's a 400-meter dash, and there are going to be some obstacles chucked in. We have two contestants. In the yellow, we've got researchers who have English as a foreign or additional language. And in blue, we have researchers who have English as their first language. I did not use AI to generate these slides. I made these all myself, so please excuse the horrible illustrations. It took me a lot more time to make than I will care to admit. So in our first obstacle in our race today, hurdle number 1, and that is reading a paper. It takes researchers who have English as an additional language almost twice as long to read a paper than that does for authors who have English as their first language. Coming up to hurdle number 2, this is writing a paper. And it takes researchers who have English as an additional language 51% longer to write a paper. I'm sure we're all aware researchers are already very time-strapped people. I've just noticed, the reference at the bottom has been cut off. That was just a reference to the paper. I just want to make clear that the data that I'm quoting here is all from that paper I mentioned earlier. Researchers are already very, very time-strapped people, and so you can imagine this additional burden of it taking twice as long to read a paper and half as long to write a paper is just putting this quite steep additional burden on these researchers. This race is not just full of uneven hurdles, there are also additional obstacles. Anyone who's done a Tough Mudder will recognise a muddy puddle in their wake. Or as my partner said when I was going through this, he said it looks like a cow pat, so whatever you'd prefer. Authors with English as a foreign language are asking someone to help edit their English for 75% or more of their articles. So for 3 out of every 4 of their articles that they are writing, they are asking colleagues, friends, people they know for just a quick help proofreading it, checking whether it's okay, and this is even before submitting it to a publisher. Again, coming back to that point about time, researchers are very time-strapped people, so this is again additional burden on those researchers. Again, going back to the point about it being primarily the younger researchers, early career researchers who are more severely impacted by this problem, they'll be going to their senior researchers and asking for help. Our third hurdle today is the frequency of language-related rejection. That is 2.6 times higher for authors who have English as an additional language. They are having to jump over 2.5 times higher than their colleagues. This is the starkest, the highest of the additional hurdles. I couldn't fit this all on one slide, so I have to zoom out here. The frequency of language-related revisions is 12.5 times higher for authors who have English as an additional language. I don't even know how you would go about jumping over this hurdle. I think you'll need some kind of pole vault for this one. So that's even if authors have not had their article immediately rejected, it's gone through peer review, they are having to spend significantly more time making revisions in order to just get their paper accepted. Bearing in mind with publishers, we will be proofreading and copy editing these manuscripts, so this feels a little bit like a bit of an unnecessary burden to be putting on authors. Our fourth hurdle today is the time it takes to prepare and practice for a presentation. I'm sure there'll be a few speakers today who can empathise with this one. Researchers who have English as an additional language need almost twice as long to prepare and practice for their presentations. The hurdles are now over for our researchers who are native English speakers. However, unfortunately, we have 2 additional last-minute obstacles in the way for our researchers who have English as an additional language. The first of those is that 30% of authors who have English as an additional language often decide not to attend a conference. Conferences are really important for researchers, not just to be able to present their research and get it out there in front of a wider audience, but they are amazing opportunities to connect with your colleagues. I'm sure people have been doing that today here. It's a really good opportunity for the younger researchers to get out there and meet potential other lab groups they might want to work in. It's an amazing space to collaborate and find collaborations for your research. So it's really sad that, a sort of, a big chunk of people are considering not attending due to their confidence with speaking English. And any fans of Mario Kart will recognize this last obstacle. 50% of authors who have English as an additional language will decide not to give an oral presentation at a conference. To me, it just seems very, it's a wasted opportunity. It's a really sad opportunity. So just to zoom out here on the race, you can see the extent of these additional hurdles that are faced by researchers who have English as an additional language compared to their counterparts who are native English speakers. So I just wanted to start this presentation by really grounding us in the problem. As a product manager, I think that's really important to sort of understand what are the issues faced by our customers. And the second half of this talk will now be focused on the solution that we're exploring. However, as I'm a product manager, I didn't want to just stand up here and say, this is the solution. What I'm going to be talking about, I want to clarify, is a potential solution to one of the problems. I completely reserve my right to be wrong on this one. What we're working on is very much a proof of concept. So we're using technology to explore this problem with our customers. I'm not going to claim that we've solved this issue. Just quickly going back to sort of my role at the Royal Society of Chemistry, I'm author-focused, so a lot of those problems that I just mentioned are faced by researchers more generally, but when looking at solutions, I'm really interested in what is primarily impacting them when they are authoring. And so for me, the big areas were that writing area, and that extra check area. So that was 3 out of every 4 of their papers. They're asking colleagues to help proofread their English. And with the writing, it was, I can't remember if it was 50, I think it was 50% longer it takes to write a research paper. As I'm product focused as well, I'm really looking for the areas where technology can help combine to solve problems for users. Some of the other problems faced in that race, for example, the higher rates of rejection or revision. There might be technology solutions, but there's also big solutions for the way that as publishers we have guidelines for peer review and things like that. So that's why I was really interested in this writing and extra check phase. And like all good product managers, we also had an off-chance conversation with a technology partner. So my solutionizing brain definitely went into overdrive there, and I saw some cool technology, and I thought, hey, I think we can use this in this area. So the solution that we're looking at is machine translation. And I hear you all screaming, that's not a new thing. No, it's been around for a very, very, very long time. I was definitely using Google Translate to help with my French homework when I was at school. However, historically, it's just not been suited to specialist terminology. And leaving aside the fact that we are a chemistry publisher, there's obviously a lot of very specific terminology involved in chemistry and chemical sciences. Outside of that, research papers themselves are also full of specialist language and specialist structure. So the way that you write a research paper, it's got a very specific structure. What is suitable for an abstract is not suitable for an introduction. That's separate from the way that you'd write a results section. So it's just the whole research paper is steeped in the specialist terminology and the specialist structure, this language that you have to know. So it's just not been possible until fairly recently to put out a research paper that flows naturally and feels like that it hasn't gone through a machine translation, basically. However, there have been a number of developments in machine learning over the past couple of years that have really opened up more opportunities in this space, and that's what we're really interested in exploring. So primarily, developments in AI have really allowed for machine translation to handle those complex structures, complex sentence structures. AI has also really improved the quality of translations, making them more fluent and natural. There are also significantly fewer errors now, and that's a really important point because with publishing, if we were offering a tool to an author and we introduce an error to their paper, that can have really grave consequences in peer review, and we wouldn't want to be putting anything out there for our customers which would result in their paper getting rejected. That is terrible for the authors, and it's also terrible for us as a publisher. So the bar is really, really high. We have a very, very low tolerance for any sort of errors being introduced. In addition, one of the most interesting developments over the past couple of years has been its AI's ability to continuously improve the machine translation tools with that ongoing learning and refinement. So the solution that we're exploring is machine translation, but with the incorporation of parallel data. Parallel data is essentially a big bank of, for us, chemistry-specific words, and we have that in multiple languages. So we can have that in Chinese and then also in English, and we can give this to the tool, and it will then recognize when I see this specialist phrase, I need to input this English variant, and that makes it a lot more reliable for translating our chemical content. Compare that to something like Google Translate, which is neural machine translation, but they have human contribution. Our translation tool with parallel data is a lot more reliable than what we can get out of something like Google Translate. An interesting point as well is the character limit. So there's something like a million character limit on the tool that we're using. Things like Google Translate have about 5,000. I think the average article was something like 27,000 characters. So you can imagine if you're trying to translate big chunks of content, you're going to have to split it up if you're using something like Google Translate, whereas our tool, you can put a whole research paper in. I don't think we've ever got anywhere near the 1 million character limit. And it can do it all in one go for you, giving you one article at the end of it. I've just highlighted in the bottom row here just an example of where our machine translation gives you sort of that more natural and fluent feel of the text. So the example here is high quality water supply and water supply safety in water distribution systems is an important part of urban drinking water quality assurance. Whereas if you put the same sentence, this was a Chinese to English translation, if you put the same Chinese sentence into Google Translate, it was coming out with high quality water supply and water supply security in water transmission and distribution systems are important contents of urban drinking water quality assurance. It just doesn't quite flow. I think if you read that, you could know that it wasn't, that the translation's slightly iffy there. It wasn't written by someone who is fluent in English. And I've given the author translated this into English as well as had the Chinese version. And this was the author's translation. You can immediately see it's slightly longer than the translation that's come out of our tool, and it just flows not quite as well as a couple of unnecessary words. So out of most of our experiments that we've done, the machine translation has come out better than what the author was able to do when writing into English. So, something that I think is really cool about this solution that we're working on, it's not called RSC Translate. We don't really have a name for it. That's what we've been calling it internally. It's a rubbish name, I know. I hope we can come up with something cool. I don't know if anyone works on REX here, Research Exchange. I think that's the coolest name out of any publishing product. So hopefully we can come up with some cool name for it other than RSC Translate. But not only are we able to train it on our specific sort of chemistry terms and our style that we look for in RSC papers, we are also able to hijack the peer review process itself on the right-hand side here. So all of our articles, sorry, not peer review, copy editing, all of our articles are copy edited, and that means that any of our articles that have gone through the translation software, they will go to someone who not only is a fluent English speaker, but their job is literally to correct and make sure that everything is perfect grammatically. So we are able to ingest the feedback that we have got via our copy editing process to further improve our translation, which I think is really cool. We grappled with this problem for a while because finding someone who is an expert in chemistry and who speaks both whatever the original language was and English to a fluent degree, and can spot where there are issues with not just the scientific terms, but the language. We weren't sure how we were going to handle that problem until we realized that we already have experts reading all of our articles, and we're able to match up those corrections with the original version. And that way we can quality check all of our translated articles. So I just want to make it very clear that what we're working on is very much a proof of concept. We're working iteratively, so we're very much in this phase over on the left-hand side here of I am pushing over a truck. It is very much proof of concept. We don't think we've come up with this perfect solution to solve this problem, that it's, the burden that is faced on these researchers who have English as an additional language. But we're really excited to be exploring how far AI translation has come in order to see if there are any learnings that we can take and how importantly, our customers want to interact with this technology. So we currently have a proof of concept out with our with researchers just in China at the moment. We want to keep it quite small scale. It's not available to everyone because we didn't want to release that beast quite yet. So it's available to a small section of customers who we're working with really closely to understand how they want to use it, if it's useful, and also keep that quality check in place just to make sure we're never going to be introducing any errors that could cause any issues for our customers. We might kill it. It might be completely wrong. Researchers might not want to use it. I'm not wedded to this idea. We're just really excited to be testing this solution and seeing what we can be doing with cool technology. Or we might think, hey, we've actually stumbled across something pretty cool here, and it might make its way across this line to be a shiny Alfa Romeo. So, managed to scrape back a few minutes, so I was worried about going into everyone's lunch break and everyone getting angry at me. But just to conclude, there is this additional burden faced by authors who have English as an additional language, and we are currently exploring how advances in AI and machine learning could help us level that playing field to help make academic publishers more equitable to all authors globally. There's a link there to my LinkedIn. I'm really interested in having a chat with any publishers here who might be exploring something similar or just want to talk about this. I'll be here for lunch and drinks later, so please feel free to reach out. Any questions?
Thanks for the talk. I think
Sorry.
sorry, it's my voice is
No,
going
I think
as
it's
well.
taking a second for it to come.
Thanks for the talk. I think it's really important because it touched the language privilege that lots of people have it and they don't realize.
Yeah.
Question: Are you considering publishing the original paper as well, together with the translation, and will be the original paper, the original paper, and the translation just a translation?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So this is something that we're actively talking with our customers about to understand really what they want. Some of the feedback that we've got initially has been, if we have this paper in our original language, why can't we publish this and make it available? Because as I said earlier, it's taking almost twice as long for researchers to read a paper. So if we could make it available in their main language, then why not? I think there's really interesting implications with versioning and how you can control that. As I mentioned, finding people who are experts in both languages and science is a really hard thing to come by, and I'm not sure how you would control the versioning of that. We don't have people, so just say with the Chinese version, for example, it would be difficult for us to compare the original Chinese version with the English version and make sure there was nothing different in between if we were publishing them. I'm not sure how you would control that versioning issue. It is something that we're talking with customers, though, to understand what they want. So I don't have an answer for that question. It's something that we're interested in exploring, but there are, some technical issues why it's slightly more difficult than you would hope, I think. If you've got any thoughts about that, I'm happy to have a chat.
And there's also the other side, because there's a lot of research being published in other languages, Portuguese, Spanish, in South America with Celo, Chinese and everything. So there's the need of getting that research as published in a different language available for people that do not know that languages. Yeah,
so that's more on the sort of the reading side of things. So there might be interesting applications to make. We know a lot of authors use like browser translate and things like that, but there are issues with it getting the specialist language correct. So there might be an opportunity there to enhance that, at least on our publishing platform. Again, it's something that we're discussing. That might be a future implementation of something like this tool. At the moment, we're very much focused on making sure the quality is there. That's sort of the first hurdle to jump over and make sure that we're not, it's working. And for sure, there will be some really interesting applications in, I think, a variety of areas from something like this.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone's desperate for lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.